The first word of the Quran and the last word of the Quran were revealed 23 years apart. Put them next to each other, and you find a frame that almost no one has ever noticed. And once you see it, you understand what the entire book was for. Here is why nobody notices it. The Quran you hold in your hands is not arranged in the order it was revealed. That is the single most important fact for what we are about to do, so let it sink in. The first words that were ever spoken to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the very opening of the entire revelation, do not sit at the front of the book. And the last verse that ever came down, the final words God sent before the revelation was sealed forever, do not sit at the back. They are scattered. One is buried near the end of the book. The other is near the beginning. So if you only ever read the Quran the way it is printed, front cover to back cover, you will go your entire life and never once see these two moments touch. But when you lift them out of that printed order, and you lay them side by side in the order they actually arrived, the first thing ever revealed against the last thing ever revealed, something extraordinary happens. They line up, they answer each other, they close around the whole book, like two arms of a single frame, and inside that frame is the purpose of the entire Quran, hiding in plain sight, in the space between the first word and the last. So that is what we are going to do in the next 30 minutes. We are going to find the true first word, understand its staggering weight, then track down the true last word through a puzzle the early scholars spent centuries on, and then, finally, place the two of them together and read the frame that they make. Do not skip ahead. The whole power of this is in the reveal, and I want to be clear about the kind of thing this is, because it is the entire reason this channel exists. This is not speculation, and it is not a stretch. The first word is documented in the most authentic sources we have. The last word is settled by the greatest scholars in Islamic history. All we are going to do is put two well-established facts next to each other in the order they actually happened, and notice something that the printed arrangement of the book quietly keeps apart. Because sometimes the most breathtaking things are not buried deep where no one can reach them. They are hidden in plain sight, split across 100 pages, waiting patiently for someone to simply bring them back together. Let us start with the thing you have to understand first, or none of the rest will land. The difference between the order of revelation and the order of the book. Most people assume that a holy book is written the way any book is written, straight through, beginning to end, in one sequence. The Quran was not. It came down over 23 years, in pieces, sometimes a single verse, sometimes a long passage, descending in response to events as they unfolded, to questions as they were asked, to crises as they arrived. It was revealed the way a life is lived, moment by moment, not the way a book is printed, all at once. 23 years of revelation, arriving in fragments across 2 cities and countless events. A verse would come down answering a question someone had just asked out loud. A passage would descend in the middle of a battle, or in the aftermath of a tragedy, or to settle a dispute that had just erupted in the community. The revelation was in constant conversation with real life as it unfolded, which means the chronological order of the Quran is, in a sense, the diary of a mission, the exact sequence in which heaven spoke into 23 years of human events. And then God took that diary and arranged it into something else entirely. A final, fixed order built not around when things were said, but around how they were meant to be recited and carried for all time. So there are 2 orders resting on the same words, the order of the living and the order of the eternal. And then, separately, those fragments were arranged, not in the order they arrived. The order of the Quran that we recite today, beginning with the short opening chapter and then the long second chapter and onward, is a deliberate, fixed arrangement. One that Islamic tradition holds was set by God's own command through the Prophet, peace be upon him, not by chronology. So there are, in effect, 2 different sequences laid over the very same text. The order it was revealed in, and the order it was arranged in, and they are not the same. Now here is where that becomes astonishing. The very first passage ever revealed, the words that began everything, belong to a chapter that sits at number 96 out of 114, near the back of the book, and the last verse ever revealed sits inside the second chapter, Al-Baqarah, near the very front. So the true beginning of the revelation is printed close to the end of the book, and the true end of the revelation is printed close to its beginning. The chronological frame is completely real. It is just folded, invisibly, inside a book arranged by an entirely different logic. That is why nobody notices it. To see it, you have to unfold the book back into the order that heaven actually sent it, and almost no one ever does. Most people who read the Quran, even those who have read it from cover to cover many times over, read it only in the printed order, because that is the order it is recited in, the order it is memorized in, the order it lives in on the page. The chronological order is something you have to go looking for, deliberately, verse by verse, in the works of the scholars. So the frame sits there, perfectly intact, inside every single copy of the Quran on earth, and it stays invisible, not because anyone hid it, but because the two words that form it are simply never allowed to stand next to each other, until now. So let us find the true beginning. The first word. Picture the scene, because it is one of the most famous moments in human history. A man, alone, in a cave on a mountain outside Mecca, a cave called Hira, where he would withdraw to think and to worship, away from a city drowning in idols. He is around 40 years old. He cannot read and he cannot write. He has no idea that anything is about to happen to him. And in the dark of that cave, the angel Jibril comes to him and seizes him and says one word, Iqra, read, recite. And the man says, in terror, I cannot read, I am not a reader. So the angel embraces him, presses him so hard he thinks he cannot bear it, releases him, and says it again, Iqra. And again the man says, I cannot read. A second time the crushing embrace, a third, and then, on the third, the words come pouring through him, the first words of the Quran ever to exist in the world. Read, in the name of your Lord who created man from a clinging clot. Read, and your Lord is the most generous, the one who taught by the pen, taught man that which he did not know. Now stop, and sit with what just happened, because it is easy to rush past, and it is one of the most stunning things in the entire religion. The first command, the very first word God chose to send down to begin a faith that would reshape a third of the planet. It was not believe. It was not pray. It was not worship, or submit, or obey, or fear. The first word was read, learn. The opening command of the entire Quran is a command to knowledge. And think about who it was said to. An unlettered man who had never read a word in his life, in a society where writing was rare and most people could not read at all. God did not begin by demanding a ritual. He began by cracking open the door to knowledge and shoving humanity through it. The first thing this religion ever asked of anyone was to read, and there is a quiet miracle in the fact that he said it to a man who could not read at all, because it meant the command could never really be about the man's own ability. Iqra was not praising a scholar for learning he already possessed. It was calling an unlettered man into a knowledge he did not yet have and could not have produced on his own, a knowledge that could only ever come down from above. So the first word was a promise, every bit as much as a command. Read, it said, and I will teach you what you do not know, which is exactly how the passage closes. He taught man that which he did not know, the command and the promise, in the very same breath. And history bears out exactly what that first word set in motion. A faith that opened with the command to read and named its God as the one who taught by the pen went on, within a few short centuries, to build libraries and observatories and great houses of wisdom, to gather and preserve and translate the knowledge of the civilizations that came before it, to treat the pursuit of learning itself as a form of worship. That entire trajectory was folded, in seed form, into the very first word. God did not merely permit knowledge. He opened his revelation with it, made it the first duty, and tied it directly to knowing him. Read was never a suggestion. It was the seed of a civilization. And look at what God wrapped that command inside. Read, in the name of your Lord who created. The very first thing knowledge is tied to is the Creator. And then, look, the one who taught by the pen. The pen, writing, the tool that lets knowledge survive death and cross centuries. In 5 short verses, the opening of the Quran binds 3 things into one unbreakable knot: God, creation, and knowledge. It says, in effect, there is a Lord. He created you, and the way you will come to know him is to read, to learn, to think, to use the pen he taught you to hold. And the man who received it did not walk down from that mountain feeling triumphant. He came down, shaking to his core, his heart slamming in his chest, and he rushed home to his wife Khadijah and said, cover me, wrap me up." He did not yet understand what had happened to him, and it had terrified him. And Khadijah, may God be pleased with her, wrapped him and held him and calmed him, and she said words that have echoed through history ever since. "By God, he will never disgrace you. You keep the ties of kinship, you carry the burdens of the weak, you honor your guest, and you stand by the truth." Then she took him to an old relative of hers, a man who knew the older scriptures, and the old man listened to the whole account and said, "This is the same one who came to Moses. If I live to see the day your own people drive you out, I will stand with you." The first word of the Quran did not arrive as a gentle whisper. It landed like a mountain on a single human heart. That alone should tell you how much weight this one command was carrying. That is the first word. Read, in the name of your Lord who created. Hold on to it, tightly, every syllable of it, because in 23 years, the very last word to come down is going to reach all the way back across the entire revelation and answer it. But finding that last word is harder than finding the first. And here we have to be honest with you, because unlike the first revelation, which is crystal clear and agreed upon by everyone, the last verse revealed was not marked with a bright line. And the early scholars, the companions who lived through it, reported different answers. We are not going to get lost in that. We are going to walk through it cleanly and then land exactly where the greatest scholars landed. Here is the puzzle. When the prophet, peace be upon him, passed away, the revelation stopped forever. But no one had stood up in that final period and announced, "This verse, right here, is the last one." So afterward, the companions, trying to preserve every detail of the revelation, gave what they knew, and their answers differed. One companion said the last verse revealed was a ruling about inheritance, about who inherits from a person who dies, leaving neither parents nor children. Another said the last was the verse forbidding usury, the taking of interest. Another pointed to the tremendous verse revealed at Arafah during the Prophet's final pilgrimage, the one that declares, "This day I have perfected for you your religion." Each of these is reported in the most authentic collections, so which is it? And notice something even inside the disagreement, because it is quietly beautiful. Not one of these companions was being careless. Every one of them had lived through the revelation and was straining to preserve it with perfect precision, because every single verse was that precious to them. They were not guessing at trivia. They were each holding tight to the last piece they had personally witnessed come down, refusing to let it slip away. The disagreement is not a crack in the record. It is a fingerprint of just how fiercely these people guarded every last word that God sent. And the reconciliation the great scholars reached is not a fudge. It is beautiful, and it makes perfect sense. Each companion was reporting the last verse that he personally knew of, or the last verse on a particular subject. The last verse revealed about inheritance, the last verse revealed about usury, the last verse of legislation, the last new law. All true, all last, each in its own lane. But the last verse revealed absolutely, the final words to descend on any topic at all, the ones after which nothing else ever came, were identified by Ibn Abbas, one of the greatest interpreters of the Quran in the first generation, and the scholar Ibn Hajar later called this the soundest view of them all. A single verse, near the front of the book, in Surah Al-Baqarah. And the reports tell us, the Prophet, peace be upon him, lived only about 9 days after it came down. Think about the weight of that for a moment. 23 years of revelation, tens of thousands of words, an entire book descending piece by piece across 2 decades, and then, with this single verse about the day of return, it simply stops. The voice that had been speaking to that man for 23 years falls silent, and it never speaks again. And about 9 days later, he is gone from this world. So this was, in the most literal sense imaginable, God's last word to his messenger, the final thing sent down before the door of revelation closed for the rest of human history. Whatever that last word turned out to be, it was always going to carry an almost unbearable weight. and out of everything it could possibly have been, it was this, a reminder of the return. So we do have our last word. After 23 years, this is where the revelation ends. The verse says, "And fear a day when you will be returned to God. Then every soul will be repaid in full for what it earned, and they will not be wronged." That is the last word. Read it again slowly. Fear a day when you will be returned to God, and every soul will be paid in full for what it earned, and no one will be wronged. And here is a small detail that makes it even more striking. This final verse was the seal on the verses about money, about usury, about what you are owed and what you owe. God's very last piece of legislation was about the ledger of this world. And notice how he ended it. He did not end the law with more law. He ended it by lifting your eyes off the ledger entirely and pointing them at the day you will stand before him. The final instruction of the entire Quran closes the book of this world's accounts by opening the book of the next one. So now, at last, we do the thing this whole video has been building toward. We take the very first words and the very last words. We strip away the scrambled order of the printed book, and we lay them next to each other exactly as they arrived, 23 years apart. The Alpha and the Omega of the revelation, side by side, for the first time. The first word, read. In the name of your Lord who created man from a clinging clot. The last word, fear a day when you will be returned to God, and every soul will be repaid for what it earned. And there it is. The frame nobody notices. Sit in that for a second before we open it up, because moments like this are genuinely rare. You are looking at the first thing and the last thing God ever said, in the whole of a religion, placed side by side, quite possibly for the first time in your life. 23 years and an entire revelation stand between them. And yet they fit against each other like two halves of something that was broken apart on purpose, so that one day, finding the fit would mean something. Do you see it? Do you see what those two verses do when they finally stand together? The first word is about your Lord who created you. The last word is about the day you are returned to him. Creation and return. The very beginning of your existence and the very end of it. These are the two things every human being has always most wanted to know and been least able to answer alone. Where did I come from? And where am I going? Philosophy has circled those two questions for thousands of years. Every person who has ever lived has, at some point, lain awake and felt the full weight of them, with no reply coming back. And the Quran places the answer to both of them at the two ends of its frame, in its very first word and its very last. You came from a Lord who created you on purpose. You are returning to that same Lord, who will receive you with perfect justice. The two great unanswerable questions of human existence, answered at the two edges of the book. The book opens at the exact point where you began, made by God out of a clinging clot, and it closes at the exact point where you will end, returned to God to be repaid for your life. From your first cell to your final judgment, the Quran does not begin and end with abstractions. It begins and ends with the two great bookends of your own existence, where you came from and where you are going. And the entire rest of the Quran, every one of its 114 chapters, everything between that first word and that last word, is the road that runs between those 2 points. The road from your Lord who created you to the day you return to your Lord. The whole book is the map of the journey from creation to return, and you are the traveler on it. And that single realization reframes every verse in between. Every story of a past prophet, every law, every warning, every promise, every description of the garden, and every description of the fire, all of it, suddenly, is signposts along that one road, running from the Lord who made you to the Lord you are returning to. The Quran stops being a collection of separate, disconnected topics. It becomes a single journey, narrated in the voice of the very one waiting at the end of it, spoken to a traveler he personally set out at the beginning of it. Once you have seen the frame, you can never again read any verse as an island. Every last one of them is a mile marker on the road between read and return. But look closer, because the frame is even tighter than that. Look at the very first instruction on that road, the first thing God ever said. Read, learn, come to know. And now ask yourself, why? Why? Of all the things God could have commanded first, did he command that? And the frame answers it. Because the entire point of the span between creation and return is to spend it coming to know the God who created you, before the day you go back to him. The first word hands you the tool for the journey, knowledge. The last word tells you the destination of the journey, the return and the reckoning. The Quran, in its very first breath, says, "Learn about your Lord." And in its very last breath, says, "Because you are going back to him." The reason to read is the return. The frame is complete. And once you see that shape, the details inside it start to glow. Look at how both ends name the same one being. The first word, "In the name of your Lord." The last word, "Return to your Lord." The same Lord, Rab, stands at both ends of the frame. You open your existence in his name, and you close it returning to his presence. You were his at the very first word, and you are his at the very last. There is no point in the entire span where you belong to anyone else. The Quran even hands you the words for this exact truth, the words that Muslims say in every moment of loss and at every death. Indeed, we belong to God, and indeed, to him we are returning. From him and back to him. That short sentence is the frame of the entire book compressed into a single breath. You came from your Lord who created you, and you return to your Lord who receives you, and the whole revelation is simply that one truth, stretched out and lived across 23 years. Look at the two acts that bracket everything. At the beginning, creation, he created man. At the end, perfect justice. Every soul repaid for what it earned, and they will not be wronged. The same God who formed you with such care at the start is the God who will judge you with flawless fairness at the end. The hand that made you is the hand that weighs you, and both, the frame promises, can be trusted completely. And do not miss the words sitting in the very middle of that last verse, between creation and justice. Every soul will be repaid in full for what it earned, Which means the journey between the two bookends is not empty space. It is being recorded. Every choice you make on the road from read to return is being written down, kept, and weighed. The frame does not only tell you where you started and where you will end. It tells you that everything you do in between genuinely matters, that none of it evaporates, that the span God handed you is the single most consequential thing you will ever hold. You are not just drifting between 2 points. You are earning, every single day, what you will be repaid at the end of the road. And look at the sweep of it across the mission itself. That first word came down in Mecca, at the very dawn of everything, to a lone and frightened man in a cave. That last verse came down in Medina, at the very end, to the leader of a whole community, in the final days of his life. So the frame does not just wrap around your existence. It wraps around the entire 23-year arc of the revelation, from the first trembling word in the dark of Hira to the last settled verse before the prophet, peace be upon him, passed from this world. Beginning to end, cave to community, Mecca to Medina, the whole thing held between read and return. If this is opening the Quran up for you, if you are feeling the sheer intentional design of it, then take 1 second and subscribe, not to prop up a channel, but to stand with the people who want to see this book as the single, deliberate whole that it is, instead of scattered pieces. That is the entire reason this place exists. And tell me in the comments, right now, had you ever once been shown that the first and last words form a frame like this? I read every single reply. Because there is one more layer to this frame, and it is the deepest one, and it changes the whole feeling of it from something cold into something almost unbearably tender. You might hear all of this and think it sounds severe. You were created, and you will be judged. A beginning and an ending, a birth and a reckoning. It could sound like a sentence, but look again at what God actually did here, and you will see it is the opposite of a sentence. It is an act of mercy so complete it is easy to miss. Because God did not have to tell you any of this. He did not have to explain where you came from. He did not have to warn you where you are going. He could have dropped you into existence with no map at all, and left you to stumble through your whole life guessing at the point of it. Instead, he bookended your entire existence with himself. He told you, at the very first word, that you were created on purpose by a Lord who is the most generous. And he told you, at the very last word, exactly where you are heading, so that you would never waste the journey. And then, between those two bookends, he gave you an entire book, and he opened it not with a threat, but with an invitation. Read, come and learn who I am. Get to know me now, in the space I have given you, before the day you come home to me. That is not a cage. That is an embrace. The first word and the last word are not the bars of a prison. They are two arms, reaching all the way around your existence. One at the moment you were made, and one at the moment you return. And between them, held in that embrace the entire time, is you, and a book whose first instruction is simply, come closer and learn. And notice, even the last word, the one about the day of judgment, the one that should be the most frightening of all, does not end in fear. Read its final 3 words again, they will not be wronged. That is how the entire revelation closes, not with a threat of injustice, but with a promise against it. The God who created you from a clot and taught you by the pen will not wrong you on the day you stand before him. Not by a single atom. The last thing the Quran ever says to you, at the very edge of the frame, is a guarantee of perfect fairness from the one who made you. And that same voice, in that same book, told you plainly, do not despair of the mercy of God. The first word and the last word are 2 arms of one mercy, reaching around your whole life. And there is one final tenderness folded into the frame, so quiet that you could easily walk right past it. The first word was spoken to one frightened man, in a cave, in the dark, at the very beginning. But the frame it opened was never only for him, it is for you. When God said, read, in the name of your Lord who created, the Lord who created was not only the prophet's Lord, he is yours. The same Lord who shaped that first man from a clinging clot shaped you from one too. The day you will be returned is your day. The frame that closed around the prophet's mission closes, in exactly the same shape, around your single life. You were made by the same Lord. You will go back to the same Lord. And the same book, opening with the very same word, is holding out the very same invitation to you that it once held out to him, alone, on that mountain. Read, come, and know me, before you come home. So here is what you do with this, and it is simple. The next time you open the Quran, remember what you are actually holding, not a random collection of chapters, a frame. The first word and the last word wrapped deliberately around the whole of your existence, from the clinging clot to the return, from creation to homecoming. And remember, above everything, the very first instruction inside that frame, the first thing God ever asked of a single human being. Read, not once and not passively. Spend the span he gave you coming to actually know the one who created you and to whom you will return. That is the entire purpose of the book, and it was written into its first word and sealed into its last, 23 years apart, waiting all this time for someone to lay them side by side and finally see it. And maybe that is the real gift of seeing the frame at all. It does not only change how you read a book, it quietly changes how you see the shape of your own life. You are not a random accident, drifting through a string of meaningless days. You are a traveler, created on purpose by a Lord who is the most generous, moving through a measured span toward a homecoming with that very same Lord, and handed, at the very start of the road, a book and a single instruction to help you walk it well. Read. Come and learn who is waiting for you at the end of it. If this gave you something, tap the like button, because it genuinely decides whether a reveal like this reaches the next person who has read this book their whole life and never once seen the frame around it. And subscribe, because next we are going all the way back into that cave on Mount Hira, into the single most important night in human history, to walk through exactly what happened when that first word, Iqra, came down, moment by moment, and what it cost the man who received it. This video showed you the frame. The next one takes you to the night it began, and it is one video away. The first word was read, the last word was return, and everything you will ever do, and everything this entire book contains, lives in the space between them, held in the arms of the one who wrote both.